Showed. Okay, we're in Shabbos Zayin Daled, if I am not mistaken.
Okay, you want to do it?
I'm happy to. Let me see. Shabbos Zayin Daled. Oh no, it's only in Hebrew. There it is. Okay. So the Mishna.
Just a little background before you start this. Here and in the coming Mishnayos, we're going to be talking a lot about what is the minimum shear to be chayav on for carrying into the Rosh Hashanah, because we just said in the Mishnayos that you're only chayav for taking out something that's chashuv. You're not chayav for taking out pocket lint, unless you're the kind of person who's the weird guy who has a pocket lint collection. Then you particularly have to be careful to take all of your pocket lint out of your pocket before you go out. But in general, it's only something chashuv. So now the Mishnayos that we're going to be dealing with today are all about what's the minimum shear of something that's considered chashuv.
Grammarly does more than catch air.
Huh? Are we watching some YouTube while we're...
Sorry.
Okay, carry on.
All right. So one who carries out straw, not a straw. One who carries out straw in a measure equivalent to a cow's mouthful is liable. That's straw that a cow eats, that's chashuv. The measure that determines liability for etza, mine doesn't translate that, is equivalent to...
It's also kind of a straw of it's straw that comes from legumes.
Okay. Is equivalent to a camel's mouthful because it's coarser. He must carry out a greater amount in order to be liable. That's what my commentary says. The measure that determines liability for ears of grain is equivalent to a lamb's mouthful. The measure that determines liability for grass is equivalent to a goat's mouthful, which is smaller than that of a lamb. The measure that determines liability for garlic leaves and onion leaves, if they are moist and fit for human consumption. Did I mean leaves or like the root, like the vegetable, the garlic cloves and the onion? Or we're talking about leaves of the shoots that come off the top.
I'm not sure what garlic leaves are like, but the shoots that come out of the middle of an onion are edible.
Okay.
So that's what we're talking about.
Are they called scallions?
Scallions, yeah, it could be. I think they're different species, but
I thought so too.
But nonetheless, it's still edible.
Okay. So these garlic leaves and onion leaves, if they're moist and fit for human consumption, it's equivalent to a dried fig's amount. A dried fig bulk, mine says, this is a standard measure for human food. Right. If the garlic leaves and onion leaves are dry, the measure for liability is equivalent to a goat's mouthful. And none of these substances join together with one another to constitute a measure for liability because they are not equal in their measures. One who carries out a measure of foods fit for human consumption equivalent to a dried fig bulk into a domain where carrying is prohibited on Shabbat is liable. One who carries a measure, so any human food, okay. And all these foods join together with one another to constitute that amount because they're equal in their measures. So any type of human food will join together. This amount is calculated without their shells and without their shells and their seeds and their stems and their bran, which is the husk that comes off the wheat kernel when pounded, and their coarse bran that remains in the flour. Rabbi Yehuda says none of the shells are calculated except for the shells of lentils, which join together with the lentil to comprise the measure for liability because they are cooked and eaten with them.
Right. Just a little point over there that when it says that they don't join together in terms of the shear, they don't join together in one direction, i.e. that if you've got something that requires a smaller shear and it's just lacking and something with a greater shear comes and joins onto it, that doesn't join because the thing that requires a greater shear can't be added to it. But in the other direction, it does work. That if you have, let's say, something that's got a larger shear and it's short by just a little amount, and that little amount is filled in by something that's got a smaller shear, then that does join together to make you chayav.
Okay. Chet Aleph. One who takes out wine is liable if he takes out enough for mixing a cup, milk enough for a swallow, honey enough to apply to a sore, oil enough to anoint a small limb, water enough to rub on an eye plaster. For all other liquids, one is liable for a quarter log, and for all other wastewater for a quarter log. Reb Shimon says for all of them, one is liable for a quarter log, and they did not state all these measurements except for those who store them.
One who carries out a rope is liable in a measure equivalent to that which is used to form an ear-shaped handle for a basket. The measure that determines liability for carrying out reed grass is equivalent to that which is used to make a loop for hanging a sifter or a sieve. Rabbi Yehuda says the measure for liability is equivalent to that which is used to take the measure of a shoe for a child, as the reed is used to measure the size of the foot. The measure that determines liability for carrying out paper is equivalent to that which is used to write a tax receipt, and one who carries out a tax receipt itself on Shabbat is liable. The measure that determines liability for carrying out paper from which the writing has been erased and which can no longer be used for writing, so like a ruined piece of paper, is equivalent to that which is used to wrap around a small jar of perfume.
Right, because there's still a use for paper, even if you can't use it for writing, you can use it as a wrapper. Okay, which of course means it's got a larger shear, because even a small piece of paper is enough to write a little tax receipt on. But they've put a stamp on it or whatever to show that it's all approved. Okay. Anyway, back to Gimel. Or leather, enough leather to make an amulet. If you have parchment, then the smallest meaningful size is something that you could write the smallest parsha that's in tefillin, which is Shema Yisrael. Okay, an ink, enough ink to write 2 letters is considered significant for carrying. Kechol is mascara, not mascara, eyeshadow. Enough to paint one eye, which is interesting. That's that you think, well, surely what woman is going to only do eyeshadow on one eye? But apparently, in the Gemara explains that's the tznuos. That's the girls who would go out wrapped up, and they would only uncover one eye. You think we've got chumras over here today? Apparently, the tzanua girls in the Mishna would go out covering up the entire face except for one eye, and that eye they would put eyeshadow on. Okay. Mishna Dalet Devek is glue. So how much is that? It's enough to put on top of a branch. What did they do with this? Well, this is something like I don't know if you ever read the Twits in Roald Dahl, when they had that hug tight super sticky glue that they used to smear on the tree to catch birds to bake into bird pie. Well, apparently that's a real thing. But they would put this glue on trees as a trap to catch birds. So enough to glue on a tree that would catch the bird, and then you'd be able to catch it and shecht it. Zefes with gofris, so that's pitch. That kadei lasos nekev, in order to fix up a hole. So to patch up a hole in slachos yunasim ba'kesef chai. Certainly, it's pia b'zefes b'gofris v'chozim osim b'stima nekev katan latzibo. So it's actually to make a little spout in this jug. So that's Rashi's explanation. Meiri explains that it's as I said at first to block up a hole. Shava wax kedelitain al pi nekev katan, also enough to block up a small hole. Charsis is basically clay dust.
They call it crushed brick.
Crushed brick. Okay, yeah. Clay. I called it clay dust, and you call it crushed brick, and it's basically the same thing. Kedei lasos pi kur shel tzorfei zahab. So enough to make the piakur, the opening to the furnace where you smelt the gold, and mafuach and nichnasbo. So in other words, as another interpretation is in order to block up the entrance of the furnace, that the I guess the bellows goes into to. Do you have an what does the English say about this?
I just lost it. Wait, I just lost
About the crushed brick.
Right, the crushed brick. I just turned the page. Crushed brick enough to make the opening of a gold refiner's crucible.
Yeah, mine says crushed earthenware is equivalent to that which is used to knead and make from it an opening for the bellows to be placed in a gold refiner's crucible.
Right, for the bellows. That's I've translated it correctly over here. Cool. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Kedela Sos Pitput. Enough to make a third foot for a little pot. So let's say you had a little pokey that one of the legs is broken off. You could enough of it that you could stick it together and put a third foot on it. That's how much clay powder you need.
That's what it's calling it a tripod, which is what you're
tripod.
Right.
Right, like a pokey.
Right.
Yeah, a pokey, by the way, that's an Afrikaans word that's made it into the English language.
I never heard that.
Yep. It's spelled Potjie. It's those little tripod pots.
Right. Is that a South African English?
It's South African. No, it's if you look up in the Oxford English Dictionary, Potjie is a word. You can use it in Scrabble.
Okay.
Okay. Subin is brand Kadeli 10 Alpi Kurshal Sorfe Zahab. So now we're not even looking at it as food over here. We're saying you can use this as fuel, enough to put on the mouth of the gold smelter's furnace. Sid, which is lime, Kadela Sud Katana Shibabanos, which enough to use as a cosmetic for a very small girl. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Kedei Lasos Kilkul, enough to make a kilkul, or another gersa Kedei Lasud Kilkul, in order to put lime on a kilkul, in order to Lasud al Hatzdaim Bishvil Lahashkiv Es Hasaros Shalehem Kaplan. So basically to put I think it was an old form of waxing their legs. That sounds like what Kehati is saying over here, that they put this.
Kehati says that because this says Rabbi Yehuda says enough to flatten out the hair of the temples.
Flatten out the head of the temples.
Yeah, my translation follows Kehati. It says the lime is used as I don't know how to pronounce this word, but I looked it up, to spread as a hair removal device.
Hair removal. Yeah.
On the smallest of girls.
Okay.
But Rabbi Yehuda does say it's used to. You'll see. It's coming up next.
So what does Rabbi Yehuda say? I want to hear that, because we just did that.
Equivalent to that which is used to spread on the hair that grows over the temple, so it will lay flat.
Right. Okay. So to make the hair on the temples lay flat. Okay. But
if it's used to remove hair, you put it on your temples. It seems like
so there are two things. So those are two different opinions. One is according to the Tanakhama, it's about hair removal for a small girl, and Rabbi Yehuda says it's in order to enough to make the hair on the temples lie flat, not to remove it. I guess when you want to take it out, instead of yanking it and pulling the hair out, you sort of run water over it to dissolve it. Okay, Rabbi Nechemia Omer Kedei Lasos Andipi. In order to make an andipi, which so some people say that this is in order to put on the forehead in order to make it redder, and others say that it's kedei lasos simanim, in order to make in order to make siman on kalim that are meant to measure wine or oil. Okay, that you use the lime in order to draw the lines around the measuring lines around the kli. Okay, nonetheless, the halacha does not follow either Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Nehemiah. A Mishnah Hey Adama, when it comes to earth, kechosam martzufin, says that Divrei Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva says you need enough earth in order to make an earthen seal on like of the martzufin, which is basically the merchants. You have a sack, and you want to make sure that your sack is properly sealed and nobody's been opening it and taking produce out, so you can sell these things with seals and rely on what's inside them. So that's a nice gesunte chunk of earth that makes a seal on there. They say not enough to make a seal on a letter, which is much less. Okay. Zevil v'chol hadak. Zevil is that manure, or is it? I think zevil is manure. And chol hadak and fine sand. Enough to fertilize a small, just one sprout of cabbage. So that's Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Enough to fertilize kreisha is karti.
Fertilize leek.
That's an even smaller plant. Okay. Chol hagas, coarse sand, kedeli tain al melo kafsid. Enough to put onto a full spoon of lime. Now, what do they do? You can't explain. They would mix the sand in with the lime, and the amount that they would take out of the sand would be the same as the shear of the sarif, the kaf shel sayadim hamalei asid. Hold on, sorry. So it's right. So how much? So there's a measure when you would mix sand in with a cup of lime. There was a certain measure that they would use of sand, and that measure that's also the shear for being chayav of taking coarse sand out into the street. Okay, kaneh is a reed kadei lasos kolmos, in a reed that's long enough to make a quill out of it. Okay, imaya ave or murusas, but if it was a thick reed, which obviously is not going to work so well as a quill, or if it was broken, kadei levashel bo beitza kala sheva beitzim, then this reed is no longer in the gather of a quill. So now you have a larger shear of it, which is how much you would need, how much of these reeds you would need to burn in order to make fuel to lightly cook an egg.
Well, that's interesting because it says here reeds were often used as pens in the same fashion as quills.
Yes.
The reed had to be sufficient to fashion from it a pen long enough to reach the middle joint of the finger.
So in base we also see reeds, but it says, my translation says reed grass. Must be something different.
Yeah, that's probably not. It's not strong enough to make a quill out of it.
Oh, that's for like weaving into a basket or whatever, not the reed part itself. Okay. I was like, wait, I thought we'd seen reeds before. Okay.
Oh, good. Well remembered. Okay. So if it's unusable as a writing implement, then we look at it as fuel, and however much you would require to lightly cook an egg. Trufa unasuna beilpas. Trufa means if the egg is beaten up and it's put into a pot, which has already been warmed. So it really is a very small shear. So you just need enough to give it enough of a boost in order to soft cook the egg. Okay, that's that. Let's go back to Gimel Hay.
A little strange. Okay, hey. Hey, Gimel?
No Gimel Hay. Okay. The sages added to the laws of leaving food on a source of heat and cooking food on Shabbat. An urn that was emptied of its hot water on Shabbat, one may not place cold water into it so that the cold water will be heated. However, one may place cold water into an urn or into a cup that was emptied of its hot water in order to warm it, but not in order to heat it. Okay, in continuation of the discussion of vessels, where the prohibition of cooking applies, even though the vessels are not actually on the fire itself, the Mishnah establishes a stew pot and a pot that were removed from the fire while they were still boiling. Even if they're removed before Shabbat, one may not place spices into them on Shabbat itself. Even though the pot is not actually standing on the fire, the spices are still cooked in it because the pot is a primary vessel, i.e. the vessel whose contents were cooked on the fire. However, one may place the spices into a bowl or into a tureen, which is a large bowl into which people pour the contents of a stew pot, like a serving dish maybe. Bowls and tureens are both secondary vessels, and food placed into them does not get cooked. Rabbi Yehuda says one may place spices into anything on Shabbat except for a vessel that has in it something containing vinegar or brine or brine of salted fish.
We may not place a vessel under a lamp to catch the dripping of oil, but if he places it while it is yet day, it is permissible, and we may not benefit from it since it is not something prepared for Shabbos use. We may move a new lamp, but not an old one. Reb Shimon says all lamps may be moved except a lamp burning on Shabbos. We may place a utensil under the lamp to catch sparks, but one may not place water in it because it extinguishes them.
In what may one insulate a pot of cooked food on Sabbath Eve? And in what may one not insulate it? One may neither insulate it in the solid residue of produce that has been pressed free of its oil, nor in manure, nor in salt, nor in lime, nor in sand, whether those materials are moist or whether they're dry. All of these materials spontaneously generate heat when piled for an extended period. Interesting. Therefore, they add heat to a pot insulated in them. And one may neither insulate a pot in straw, nor in the residue of grapes, which have been pressed for their juice, nor in soft material, for example, from tattered clothing, nor in grass, when these materials are moist. However, one may insulate a pot in them when they're dry. One may insulate a pot of hot food on Shabbat Eve in clothing, in produce, in dove's wings, in a carpenter's wood shavings, and in the chaff of fine flax. Rabbi Yehuda prohibits doing so when it is fine, but permits doing it when it is coarse.
This is actually quite instructive. I remember a long time ago, I used to work in Yerushalayim in Givat Shaul, and just opposite our office was an open area where the area would take the what do they call it, the garden refuse. They have the garden refuse truck that goes around picking up stuff, and they would dump it in these big piles in this open area opposite our office. And in winter, you could actually see, in the same way as you see your breath forming outside, you could see like steam coming out of these piles of wood. That they put it through a chipper. So they made these giant piles of chipped wood all over. So it was small, and it actually was spontaneously generating heat inside there. So you could see it just against the cold air that it was creating that steam.
Interesting. Yeah, I know compost does that. I didn't realize I guess it makes sense. It is compost.
That is compost. That is compost. Okay, Orla, Aleph Zion.
Aleph.
Orla, I'm sorry, what'd you say? Orla Aleph?
We're in Orla, Aleph Zion.
Oh, I thought you said something else. Aleph. Okay. Leaves, young sprouts, the sap of vines and vine buds are permitted in respect to Orla, and Revi and to a Nazarite, and are forbidden in Asherah. Rabbi Yossi says vine buds are forbidden because they are fruit. Rabbi Eliezer says if one curdles milk with the sap of Orla, it is forbidden. Rabbi Yeshua says, I heard it expressly that if one curdles with the sap of leaves or the sap of roots, it's permitted. With a cup of unripe fruit, it is forbidden because it counts as fruit.
Okay. Defective grapes, grape kernels, grape husks, and the temid drink made from them, the peel of a pomegranate and its sprout, nutshells, and fruit seeds are all subject to the laws of Orla, a Shera, and a Nazarite, but permitted in respect of a fourth year vineyard. Fallen unripe fruit is subject to all of them.
Okay. Okay. Rabbi Yossi says one may plant a shoot of ola, but one may not plant a nut of ola because it is a fruit, and one may not graft early date berries of ola.
Yeah, so just making the point that orla applies particularly to the fruit, not to other parts of the plant.
So you could take a branch of orla
and
reseed in.
Exactly.
Interesting.
But
Okay.
you can't take a nut from the orla and plant it because the nut is the fruit.
Fruit.
Okay. I hear the technical distinction.
Okay, Shvius Ches Beis.
Seventh year may be used for food, drink, or ugnant, and to eat what is normally eaten, to use as ugnant what is normally used as ugnant. One may not use wine and vinegar as ugnant, but one may use oil as ugnant. Likewise with truma and Maisa Sheni, the seventh year is less stringent in that it may be used for kindling lights.
Produce of the seventh year may not be sold by measure, weight, or number. Neither may figs be sold by number, nor vegetables by weight. Beis Shammai says they may not be sold even in bundles. But Beis Hillel says that which is usually tied into bundles to bring to the house may even be tied into bundles for the market, such as leeks or netza halav.
If one says to a laborer, "Here is an issa for you, and gather vegetables for me today," his payment is permitted. Gather for me vegetables for it today, his payment is forbidden.
So, when you say forbidden, it doesn't mean that he's not allowed to use it, but he's basically had a barter for the Shemitah produce. So his money now takes on the kedusha of Shvius. So then we say it's aser. We don't say it's aser for him to use it at all, but it has all the halachas of Shvius, meaning that it's aser for him to use it on non-edible stuff, and he can't. All those restrictions are going to apply. So you got to be careful when you word it, and when you're wording your request to a worker to go and get you some Shemitah produce, that it doesn't render his salary into Shemitah money.
Okay. If one took from the baker a loaf of a punyan, when I have gathered field vegetables, I shall bring you. It is permitted. If he took from him without making any comment, they may not pay from the proceeds of the seventh year, since one may not settle a debt with 7-year proceeds.
Right. So, and there again, it's the choice of wording. If you're doing a barter, that's legitimate. You can barter Shemitah produce for something else, but you can't create a chov with the shopkeeper and say okay, I'll pay you back, and then come and give him Shemitah produce in order to pay him back. Okay, Taros base.
Rabbi Eliezer says one who eats a rishon food becomes a rishon, a sheni food becomes a sheni, and the shlishi food becomes a shlishi. Rabbi Yoshua says one who eats a rishon food or a sheni food becomes a sheni. One who eats a shlishi food becomes a sheni for sacrificial things, but not a sheni for truma, with chulin that was made to the tahara standards of truma.
Sorry, which where are we? Parak
Now in base Gimel, Taros. That's obviously in Seder Taros.
Yes, base Gimel. First degree uncleanliness in common food is unclean and conveys uncleanliness. Second degree invalidates but does not convey.
In other words, when it's talking about invalidates, if it touches truma, then the truma becomes pasul, but it doesn't transmit truma to anything else.
Okay, and the third degree may be eaten in a dish mixed with truma and demai.
So now, how do you get third degree truma? How do you get third degree chulin in the first place? This is talking about somebody who's holding by the chumrah of keeping of eating their chulin in the sanctity of kodesh food. So this can be eaten in a mixture. So if somebody has this chumrah, then we're not so machmir on them. If it's mixed up in a tavshil of truma, we see that's this is okay. It doesn't. Yeah.
The rishon and the sheni of truma are tameh and contaminate with truma. The shlishi disqualifies and does not contaminate with truma, and the revai may be eaten in a dish containing sacrificial foods.
Right. So this is sorry. In the previous one, we were talking about somebody who's got the chumrah of eating the chulin with the tara of truma, and this one is talking about chulin with the tara of kodesh. Okay. Then menachos aleph daled.
Okay.
So just we started out menachos on Shabbos. So just to remind you that this is the first Mishnayos of Menachos are exactly parallel to the opening Mishnayos of Zvachim. So if that Menachos is talking about flower sacrifices, whereas Zvachim is talking about the animal sacrifices, and all of the technicalities here about what is considered pigul and what's just considered pasul, but ein bo kares. And we said that pigul is when somebody has intention to eat or sacrifice outside the zman. Okay, and that's got a din of kares, but it only works if nothing else went wrong with it. With the matir, whatever normally is matir, the korban, either to the mizbech or to the kohanim, whatever's the matir is done kalacha. Okay, so you can carry on with Mishnah Dalet.
Okay. Aleph Dalet. In what manner is the part which makes it permissible but not considered to have been offered as required? If he performed chumitzah with intent for outside its area, but if he placed the chumitz in a vessel, conveyed it or burnt it on the altar for beyond its time, or he performed chumitzah for beyond its time, but he placed the chumitz in a vessel, conveyed it and burnt it outside the place, or he performed chumitzah, placed the chumitz in a vessel, conveyed it or burnt it for outside its area, or the sin is mincha offering or a jealousy mincha offering whose chametza he performed for a designation other than its own, and placed the chametz in a vessel, conveyed it and burnt it on the altar for beyond its time, or he performed chametza for beyond its time and placed the chametz in a.
Oh, we lost you. I think we lost Eliezer. Riley, you still there?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Moshe Kamat, so I'll just carry on. He took the kmitza and put it into a kli, and then he carried it and put it on the mizbech shelo lishma. That's the definition of shelo karev matir k'mitzvah, where the matir was not brought on the mizbech according to the mitzvah. If his intention was to eat a kazais outside and a kazais tomorrow, or in the other order he had this intention, or even a half measure of each, one he had the intention to eat outside, one he had intention to eat tomorrow, or in a different order, pasul v'ein bo kares. Then in all these cases, that's called pasul, but there's no kares, it's not called pigul. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. So once again, Rabbi Yehuda says the same as he did in Zvachim. Ze'aklal, your general rule is im machsheves hazman kadma lemachsheves hamakom pigul v'chayiv alav kares. He says if it started out as pigul, you can't undo the pigul. If you started out with the machsheves hazman, then it's pigul, and even if you have other pasul intentions afterwards. But only if it's the other way around, and there was some other psul before, it could become pigul. Then it's pasul. But the Chachamim say pasul v'ein bo kares. It is possible to undo the din of pigul on a korban. Okay. If he had intention to eat a chatzizais and to burn a chatzizais, that's kosher. Because the actions or the intentions for burning and for eating do not join together to make a full shiur. Okay, you can take it from here.
In the case of a priest who removes a handful from the meal offering with the intent to partake of its remainder or to burn its handful on the next day, Rabbi Yossi concedes in this instance that it is a case of pigul, and he's liable to receive kares for partaking of it. But if the priest's intent was to burn its frankincense the next day, Rabbi Yossi says the meal offering is unfit, but partaking of it does not include kares. And the rabbis say the rabbis say it is a case of pigul, and he is liable to receive kares for partaking of the meal offering. The rabbi said to Rabbi Yossi, in what manner does this differ from an animal offering, where if one slaughtered it with the intent to sacrifice the portions consumed on the altar the next day, it's pigul? Rabbi Yossi said to the rabbis, there's a difference. As in the case of an animal offering, its blood and its flesh and its portions consumed on the altar are all one entity. Consequently, intent with regard to any one of them renders the entire offering pigul, but the frankincense is not part of the meal offering.
Right, so it doesn't go right. Okay, so he says that the levana is not considered part of the offering, and therefore it's levana ena mina mincha. Hold on, Rabbi Yossi. So Rabbi Yossi says it's pasul, but it's no kares, because it's not part of the matir. So therefore, if it has a pigul intention, it doesn't make everything else pigul. Okay, carry on.
All right. If one slaughtered two lambs that accompany the two meal offering loaves sacrificed on Shavuos with the intent to partake of one of the two loaves the next day, or if one burned the two bowls of frankincense accompanying the showbread with the intent to partake of one of the arrangements of the showbread the next day, Rabbi Yossi says that loaf and that arrangement of which he intended to partake the next day are pigul, and one is liable for kares. And the second loaf and arrangement are unfit, but there's no kares. And the rabbis say this loaf and arrangement and that loaf and arrangement are both pigul, and one is liable to receive kares for both of them, for their consumption. If one of the two loaves of Shavuos or one of the two arrangements for the showbread became ritually impure, Rabbi Yehuda says both must be taken to the place of burning like any other disqualified offering, as no communal offering is divided. That is, it is neither fit in its entirety or unfit. That is, it's either fit in its entirety or unfit in its entirety. And the rabbi said, the impure one remains in its state of impurity, and the pure one shall be eaten.
So you can basically divide them, and say that this is so the two challahs. These are two challahs that are brought on Shavuos we're talking about here. So Rabbi Yehuda views them as one entity. And if one is pasul, the other one's also pasul. But the Chachamim say that you can be mechalek between them. Okay, finally we are on to Nadarim Hey Vav.
Nadarim. Find it. Oh, blew by it. Nadarim Hey Vav. Vav. With regard to one who is prohibited by a vow from deriving benefit from another, and he does not have anything to eat, the other may give the food to someone else as a gift, and he is then permitted to eat it. So you can launder your food. The Mishna recounts an incident occurred involving someone in the city of Beit Horon, whose father had vowed not to derive benefit from him, and the son was marrying off his. Sorry, my screen glitched. Marrying off his own son, and wanted his father to be able to participate in the wedding meal. And he therefore said to another, the courtyard where the wedding will take place and the wedding meal are given before you as a gift, but only so that my father will come and eat with us at the meal. The recipient said, if they're mine, they're all hereby consecrated. He consecrated to heaven, that is the temple, and are forbidden to everyone. So he's like, oh, great, I'm gonna make it a hektish. The son said to him in anger, and did I give you my property so that you should make it hektish? You consecrate it to heaven? And he, the recipient, said back to the son, you gave me your property only so that you and your father would be able to eat and drink and thereby appease each other. And the sin of transgressing the vow would be hung on his, i.e. the giftee's head, as I enabled that transgression. So the sages therefore said, any gift that is not absolute, so that if the recipient were to consecrate the gift, it would be consecrated, is not really a gift. In other words, in order for it to be a gift, the recipient must have the ability to consecrate it. You have to totally give it. You can't just say, like, just play games.
So that is a very smart thing that the third party guy said.
Like, I'm not getting involved.
Let's see how serious this gift of yours is.
It sounds like like tax code gifts in US law. Okay, in the case of one who vows that cooked foods are forbidden to him, so it's like an old paleo something. He is permitted to eat roasted and boiled foods as they are not defined as cooked. If one said cooked food is konam for me, and for that reason I will not taste it, he is prohibited from tasting a loose cooked food, but is permitted to taste a thick one, which people do not generally refer to as cooked food. And he is likewise permitted to eat a turimuta egg and a remutza gourd, as they are not considered cooked foods either.
One more.
Eliezer is
Hello.
showing his
Oh,
face
wow.
here.
Yay. And you've changed your name, I see.
Okay. I have no idea what's going on.
Well, welcome back. You're just in time to read the last Mishnah of the day. We're in Nadarim Vav Beis.
You're breaking up. I can't hear what you're saying. So
Should I just do it?
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Okay. In the case of one who vows that food cooked in a dish is forbidden to him, he is prohibited from deriving benefit only from food that is cooked by boiling it in a dish. However, if one said that which enters into a dish is konam for me, and for that reason I will not taste it, he's prohibited from tasting anything cooked in a dish.
Okie dokie. That's it.
All
Shavua
right.
tov, everyone.
So,
Mitzvah Hashem. See you tomorrow.
see ya.
Bye.